Hello everyone, my name is Mr. Popo and we are Popo. In this tutorial, we're gonna learn how to create this glitch liquid After Effects text transition. So the first thing that I'm gonna do, I need to mention how really important it is to keep your file really organized. So I would suggest that you make 3 folders. One of them is importing the assets that are gonna be accompanied with this tutorial. You can download the project on the link below in the description. So one for imports, one for the main composition that we're gonna render, and then one for the pre-comps. So these ones, all right, the first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna create a new composition and we're gonna call it text here. Now I have it already here. So this is the composition that we just created, text here, and I have a simple text. I use Bebas New regular with this kind of settings. The reason I'm doing this, it's because I want to be able to change the text without really having to mask and do all the effects and then having to redo everything for every single text or title reveal that I want to do. So my text is here, pretty good. All I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to composition, layer, pre-compose, okay? And I'm gonna call this text animation. Great. Now anything that I do to this composition will affect whatever that is inside. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go out, I'm going to go into the beginning, bring up the scale, and I'm going to scale this really a lot. Cool. And I'm going to go like 15 frames, and I'm going to put this back to 100. Great. We have a little problem here. We have a bunch of problems. So let's fix them. The first one is this is full resolution, but the problem is that it is a little bit too, doesn't really look too good. It's a little bit blurred. So to fix this, all I'm going to do is ask After Effects to look at the layers exactly how they are inside. And that is called rasterize. So when I click this button right here, if you don't have it, you can just press these ones here and it should appear. Then when you click, After Effects is going to read them exactly like they are. Great. So now that is out of the way, the second problem is the animation. All right. So the reason it looks like this, because the animation is linear. To fix this, all I need to do is select my keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. Now, what happened? Everything got eased. My animation is smoother. It was really good. But the problem is this is not as impactful as I want it to be. And the thing about this is that that's all After Effects can offer me. So if I want to change something as I wish, I need to actually go into the curve. So I'm going to click this icon here called Graph Editor. I'm going to click here, and this is how the speed looks like right now. So it starts ramping up and then it goes down. But what I want is I want this speed to be really high in the beginning and then it just slows. But the problem here, it still ramps up, but I don't want it to ramp up. I just want it to go down. So all I need to do is hold Shift and go all the way to the back. And this is what I'm gonna have. Great. So in my render, there was a little thing right there. And that is, even when it comes in, it keeps going back. So how did I do that? Honestly, it's gonna be very tricky if you try to do it right here. So what I'm gonna do instead is I'm gonna create a new null object. I'm gonna call this text scalar. And what I'm gonna do something called parenting. So this layer is going to follow whatever this layer is going to do. And all I have to do is go into the scale, put a keyframe there, and go a little bit, put 90. All right, how is it? So it keeps going back. All right. And by the way, I think we'll just need 2 seconds. So I'm just going to go and drag this here and trim comp to work area. So we just have 2 seconds. Now that we have our animation, the next thing is we need to do the effects. But before we do the effects, I think it is really, really good if I explain to you all the effects that we're going to use, and then you can follow along quickly. How does that sound? Great. All right, cool. Let's try it. So I'm going to make a new composition and I'm going to call this tests. So you don't have to do this, or you can do it to follow along. I'm just going to bring this text. I'm just going to put it here. Now, if I want to apply effects to this text, I could just go and put the effect here. But if I want the effects to be applied to everything in the composition, I need to create new adjustment layer. Great. Now, just for the sake of understanding what's going on here, I'm going to bring a picture that I have. I'm going to put it here. Great. This is just so that we see what's going on. Now, if I do any effect on this one, it should affect everything here. All right. The first effects that we're gonna look at is called CC Bender. Now, if you don't have this, you can download it from Video Copilot for shortcut. So the first one we said is CC Bender. Now, what is CC Bender? The moment I created it, I'm just gonna hold this off. The moment I created it, I got these 2 things and I've got all these things here. So what are these things? Let's turn this back on. If I just don't change anything else, but try to change this, you'll see it's trying to bend the layers. And here, how did I know they bend? First, because I can see it. 2, it's because it has a style layer called bend. end. Now, the thing about this, how it works is you have a start and you have an end. All right, so you have a top and you have a base. Obviously the top, if I click here, that's the one. The base is, that's the one. Cool. So these handles are these two things. So if I want to control where to bend my layers, I'll just have to control this. If I want to control how much they bend, I can just change the amount. Now, is that all? Kind of, for this style. But there are a lot of styles that you can, experiment with. One of them is Marilyn, which is the one that we're actually going to use. As you can see here in Marilyn, it gives me that TV distortion, the old TV, if you guys remember the CRT TVs. And we discussed this in the previous tutorials. For this one, what we're going to do is we have Marilyn. Marilyn, it just bulges the text between this and between this. So if I drag these two here, obviously what's going to happen is this here is going to be bent as a bulge. Now, let's get this back here. Let's get this back here. Great. The other one is sharp. So basically, it's the same thing, just instead of being curved, it's just going to be a sharp one. And of course, we have a boxer one, which is mix of everything that we just seen. Cool. Now, the next effect that I need to explain is called sissy smear. All right, so what is sissy smear? The first thing you see, we have a kind of awkward bulge here. All right, so if I just control this thing here, it's called 2, this thing, I'll be able to control where the bulge is looking at. And of course, from means that if I take this, obviously this is from where the bulge is going to start, this is from where the bulge is going to end. Perfect. And where it's looking at. The thing about this is there's so much control about this, is that how far it reaches, okay? And also how much it reaches. So as you can see here, how far, so it reaches way too much than before. So if we just reset this and I try to put this here, you see it's not reaching much. But if I do the radius, it's gonna affect more things. So if I animate this here, I'm gonna get a funky meme effect. Cool. And also, just to mention, everything that has a stopwatch, it could be animated. What I mean by that is, for example, we have this 2 here, and then I can just go a little bit here, and I can just take this 2 and put it here. So what's gonna happen? I'm gonna have this. All right, so anything can be animated with a stopwatch. Great. Now, another one that we're going to look at, and this is one of my favorite, it's called Bezier Warp. So in the beginning, when you apply it, it's kind of scary, but don't worry. Don't look at this part. Just look at this. All right, cool. Now, basically, I have some handles. I have some points, and I have some handles. What am I talking about? So if I take this one here, and I drag it here, you see what's happening? So I'll have these things, and these things are called Bezier. So they help me curve things, you see? And so if I want to create something that's really funky, that's going to be possible. And then if I animate my text, I'm going to have a Star Wars effect kind of thing. And that obviously applies to every single thing here. So you can really create really funky results. So now the next effect that we're going to look at is called ripple. We've discussed this so many times, so I'm just going to go through it a little bit faster. Ripple is this effect when you do it, nothing's happening. But when you increase the radius, as you can see here, it's creating ripples basically. All right. It's creating it from the center. How do I know? Because the center of the ripple is there. So if I put this one here, this is going to be the center. It's going to affect everything else. Now, one thing I could do, if I press play, it's going to be animated at this speed. If I control this to 0.1, the speed is going to be very slow. So let's bring it back to 1. And the wave width, obviously, has to do with how many waves do I have. Cool. So the more I increase, the less I have, because the waves are bigger, wider. And if I want to increase how much they are affected between one wave and another, all I have to do is play with the height. So as you can see here, I have bigger waves, but then taller waves as well. All right. And then if I want to choose exactly what kind of where the waves are, I can just play with the face, and then I'll be able to choose where the waves are. Great. Now, the next effect is called twirl. If I go and play more with this, I don't see anything. But if I try to play more with the rotation and then increase the twirl radius, you'll see what this effect does. So what it does is it just twitches things. So this effect, you probably recognize it if you watch PewDiePie. So the more I rotate, the more I'll be able to play with this. And of course, I can choose where the center of the twirl is. See that? So everything just folds in. Now, one more thing. I'm going to use the quick aberration. Now, this is a plugin. It's an effect. It's for free. You can go to aescripts.com and you can get this quick chromatic aberration. All right. So the reason I like this is because it saves a lot of time. So I'm just going to go through it faster. What this does, you don't see anything, but you can see a little bit here. Okay. So you can see what it does. It splits the RGB. The reason I like this is because, one, I could choose what kind of RGB split I want to do. Do I want the red and blue, just the RB, or do I want red and green, as you can see here, or do I want just a green and blue, which is great. Okay. Okay. And of course I can choose the position of the layers that are going to be split. And I also can choose if I want to rotate them, and I can choose the scale. Normally this is what you play with. And if this RGB split chromatic aberration is a little bit too sharp, you can blur it. That's the reason I think that this effect is really essential. So just get it, it's for free, why not? Now, this is pretty much about most of the effects that we need, like the essential effects that we need to create that liquid glitch effect. How about you pause the video and go and try it by yourself if you have a lot of time. If you're still a beginner and you still want to just follow along, no problems. So we're going to go back to our text animation here. The first thing is we're going to create obviously a new adjustment layer, and then we're going to call this effects stack. All right. Let's get started. So the first effect that we're going to start with is called CC Bender. Now, this effect again, it's the one that just bulges and bends things. Perfect. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to reset this. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go back a little bit here. I'm going to take this somewhere here and take this somewhere here, and then I'm just gonna go a little bit lower like this, so yeah, something like that. Perfect. I'm gonna put a keyframe, and then I'm gonna go something like 1, and I'm gonna put this back to 0. All right, obviously this is not really what I want. I prefer the Marlin. Cool. Yeah, I'm just gonna drag this a little bit here. So this is what I have. Cool. So I'm just trying to get this bulge right here, somewhere at the end. Okay, so just like what we see here, I'm just trying to get this bulge right here. Great. And obviously we can just change everything later on. Cool. So I'm just going to take this both keyframe and just press F9 or easy ease. Great. So that is the bulge. Perfect. So I'm just going to go like 20 frames. I think it's way better. Great. Cool. I could just take this and make it even faster. If I try this. Perfect. So it just bulges a little bit. Cool. The effects is CC smear. Perfect. And what I want is I just want this to be somewhere here. Perfect. And I'm just going to go and try to animate these. So in the beginning, I'm just going to put this like that. I don't really need the reach, so I'm just going to take it out. And I'm going to go to somewhere like this. Actually, I could just bring this here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the CC smear, put it a little bit somewhere, just a little bit like this. Cool. And just a little bit like that. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to say that somewhere here. But then in the beginning, I want this to be a little bit better. So I'm just going to go and do like 170, something like that. Cool. So then what I have is this. Perfect. So that's it. So this is what I have so far. Cool. Now let's use CC Bender to bend all this and get the shape that we want. All right. So I'm going to go and put CC Bender. Cool. So it's the same effect. This time I'm just going to try to go to sharp. Cool. So I don't see anything because there is no amount. And I'm going to try to just bend this just a little bit. So I'm just trying to get that TV kind of look. I need to control these a bit. So I'm just going to put this one here. I'm going to put this one somewhere where it doesn't just distort everything all at once. I'm just going to go somewhere here. So just to cut this a little bit, that's what I have. Perfect. So I'm just going to put a keyframe here, press U. So when I press U on the keyboard, that's why I get all the keyframes that I animated. I'm just going to put here 0. So now everything should be back to where it was. If I could just do it like this, it should be better. Perfect. So that sharpness gives that little bit of a cut there. You see, it's like that scan thing. Great, because this is liquid and at the same time it's glitch. So that's why I'm using all this. So I'm trying to make it as TV as possible without using a TV. All right, now with the fun stuff, which is the Bezier 0. Cool. Now, this is the end result. So before we do anything, I'm just going to make sure that I'm on 1, which is the end of the effect, and put the keyframes on all of them. Just drag this. Now, if I press U, I should have all of them here as a keyframe. Great. Now I'm just going to go into the beginning. I know I'm just going to try to make it look as warped as I feel like. So I'm just going to go something like this. Go bring this a little bit back because I want it to be just slightly off screen as well. And then something like that. And I don't really like this one here. So I'm just going to go and drag this like that. You see, so it's like coming out of the screen. Cool. I'm just going to go and drag this a little bit because I want these letters as well to come in. So I'm just going to go something as such, and I'm just gonna go and do this way up and just try to bring this slightly to that side. All right, so now obviously I need to take all this and put an easy ease, so F9. Great. I just think that for this bender here, for the amount, I think I could just end it somewhere here already. Perfect. Now let's continue a little bit with the ripple. So ripple, we talked about ripple. It's that thing that actually just affects everything as water. So I'm just going to take the center of the ripple and make it somewhere here, because this is where the liquid thing is happening. But this is not really liquid. This is too much. So I'm just going to go and increase a little bit the width of this wave. So I'm just going to go and increase until 100, hopefully. There we go. Now this is how it looks like. All right, but it keeps rippling. Great. And then I'm just gonna, I don't feel like it's affecting too much, so I'm just gonna increase this just a tad bit. Okay, somewhere like this. So now it's really warping like a wave. And let's just look for a better wave. Yeah, I think a wave like this is way better. Now, all I have to do is check this radius, go all the way down, go until the end, and just kill it into 0. And you can just easy ease this, F9. Cool, so now what do we have? This. But the problem that I have is, I wish if this liquid thing was only affecting where the glitch is happening. So the glitch part is only happening on the left side in the beginning. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get my pen tool, make sure it's on an adjustment layer, and I'm gonna try to draw roughly where I want this to affect. All right, so I think this is pretty okay, but the problem is I want this ripple to only affect this part. So what I'm gonna do again, I'm gonna bring the effects, go inside ripple, compositing option, put it on. So now the ripple is only affecting that part. So as you can see, everything else is still affecting, and the ripple is the only thing that is masked. Perfect. It's a little bit too rough. Do you see this? You see this thing here? It's a little bit too rough. I'm gonna feather the mask. So I'm gonna press M. It's gonna bring me the mask. And then I can go feather. Or I can just press F and then I'll get feather. Cool. I'm just gonna feather just a little bit so as you can see here. So I just want you to see what's happening here. See that? Cool. If we look at it. Perfect. Let's get in there. Great. Now let's get to the next effect. Let's go. The next effect is twirl. I'm just gonna go and bring this effect. Cool. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna add a little bit of value. Let's just say 30. Yeah, and just increase this a little bit. Yeah, but the thing is, I don't really want it to be from this, so I'm just gonna go and put it somewhere in the corner here. Cool. You see what it does? So it just starts everything from here. Great. So I'm just gonna try to animate this. So from here, and then the entire thing goes all the way. You see that? That's what I'm talking about. Until it's completely out, because as long as it's not out, I'm not gonna go with it. Cool. You see what it does? You see now? This twirl is what gives me that wavy effect at the end. Great. So I'm just gonna take this, put an easy ease. Let's see if easy ease is actually doing it. Cool. So everything now is giving me the water effect. Great. We're getting there. We're getting there. So hang in there. You're pretty much done. So we're gonna create a quick chromatic array. So again, just download this from aescripts.com. Cool. Now we have red and blue, and I'm just gonna keep it at 0.5. Sounds good to me. But here I'm just gonna go to 99. Okay, something like that. Cool. So from an art direction perspective, it's too generic and it's too distracting because everything is in focus. So it would be better if I could direct the attention and focus to a certain part exactly when I want. Okay, and here I want to be able to only focus here because we're going to create other light bleaks and elements outside and background and glitches, and I wish if we could only focus on the center of the text. Now to do this, I could create an adjustment layer with some blur, like compound blur or something, which is really beautiful. But the problem with that is I need to keep animating it until the end, and that's not really good. And just to demonstrate how that looks like, so just fast box blur, just so we can go fast. So if I do this, so what I mean is now if I want to just focus right here, I'll just mask this and I'll just go feather, subtract, and I'll just do this, and then I'll press M, mask path, then I'll go a little bit and I'll say no, I wish I can have something here, you know, something like that, and then at the end I wish I could be just focused right here, you know, something like that. So I'll have to keep animating this, and then if I change the text, I'll have to change literally everything. So that's not really a right way to do this. So what are we gonna do now? What we're gonna learn is something we call mapping. All right, so let me explain a bit. So I'm gonna create this under map explanation. Great. Let's bring our guy here, click, transform, fit to comp. Now the picture is not really our concern, but where's our goal? To be able to tell an effect to apply itself on some things without having to actually animate it. To demonstrate, I want to use a compound blur. The reason I want to use a compound blur, one, because it's an amazingly beautifully artistic blur, and it allows me to use a map. Another effect that can do that, call this camera lens blur. Camera lens blur also allows you to use a blur map. So blur mapping is something that we use a lot. So what it is, I wish I could use an effect or a layer to show me where the blur is going to be applied. Kind of effect that we use is commonly known as fractal noise. So I'm going to call this map. Cool. So I'm just going to solo this so that we can focus on this. So fractal noise is an effect that we use because it's white and black, and it's generated, and I can animate it. Automatically generated, and I don't need to do anything. The reason why this is needed is because effects understand black and white. Okay, so black, I'm not gonna apply myself. White, I'm gonna apply the effect there. Pretty straightforward. So I'm not gonna go into the details of fractal noise, so you can watch other tutorials about that, but for now we just need to play with these two. So contrast is how bright it is gonna be, and brightness, if I turn it down, I'm gonna have the black things there. Cool. So if I turn this off, bring this back up, turn this on, I can choose the map. And the reason we don't see anything right now, even if I increase the map blur, nothing is happening because it's using the layer as it is. Right now the layer is black, but if I tell it to use the effects on that layer, now you can see this looks like the mirror effect, as you're looking at this from mirror. Now if I change anything about this, you will see that the layer, the blur, is changing according to how this looks like. So you invert this, so black, white. If I invert, white, black. So let's look at the map. That's it. So you can see how this works. Great. So let's apply this. Now I'm gonna go back to my stack and apply the compound blur. The moment I apply it, I get it here, but it doesn't do anything because it's after the quick chromatic aberration. Normally, anything about blur should be before the quick chromatic aberration, especially the compound blur. Cool. So I'm just gonna turn it off just so that I can focus on only the compound blur. Right now, the compound blur is just using the layer itself, which is not working because we need to create, again, the blur map. Focus blur map. Cool, because we want to use this to do a little bit of focus. So I'm going to put it down, solo it, and create the fractal noise. Now, in fractal noise, I have a lot of types because this one is a little bit rough. So I'm just going to go a little bit dynamic. I'm going to increase, yeah, soft linear. I'm just going to go and increase this a lot, something like this. And I'm just going to turn this down a bit, just a bit, not too much. I think this is all right. And I'm just going to go and increase the scale. I'm just gonna go and increase this a lot. So this is like 600 is the maximum, but you can always just drag this to make it like, you know, really big. So I just need it to be slightly big. Okay, so I wish if I could just invert actually. Cool, so now I just have something like this, which is really good. Yeah, I think we could start from this. I think I don't need too much complexity here. So I'm just gonna put this as 4, just a little bit. Great, now I'm just gonna put a keyframe on evolution. So evolution is how you animate this. So that's what I wanna do. So I'm just gonna put a keyframe here and go all the way to the end, all right? And just try to, yeah, just try to get something like this. So now this is what's happening. I'm just shifting the focus into the center. Great. Now let's go back to our effects stacks, compound blur, using the focus blur map with the effects. Cool. So now it's not really applying because I really need to increase how much the blur is. So I'm just gonna go something really big. Something like that. So yeah, it's the focus blur and it's affecting that. All right, so I'm getting these things at the end, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, you see that? That's what compound blur does. Just one thing, I wish I could just move this a little bit like that. Cool, so let's see now. Yeah, so it would be great if I could just animate that as well. So just take this offset turbulence and just at the end, just bring it somewhere around here. Cool, so now we have a little bit of blur, and then at the end, just move it a little bit like that. Perfect, that's it, cool. Now we're ready to move to the next thing. We need to tackle how the text looks like. So right now the text is just a bland black and white. All right, so let's fix that. First, before we fix that, I think we reversed, sorry, this was my mistake. We reversed how these are. So this is supposed to be text here, and this one is supposed to be text animation. So just rename your things properly. So this should be fixed. All right, let's get inside. Now we have the text here. Now, one of the effects that we're gonna use here, we're gonna use the color palette. So one of the effects that we have, we're gonna call them 4-color gradient. The reason I wanna use this effect is because it gives me 4 colors that I can play with. So I just wanna give it that eerie feeling. So I just wanna be able to play with this color and animate them inside of the text. All right, so I have a bunch of colors already set. So I'm just gonna use them. So I'm just picking them and you can just get them. So it's something like that. All right, now what I'm gonna do is I wish if these can be applied to the text itself. The reason I don't want to change anything about the text, again, it's because I don't want to be able to rely so much on this layer. I want to be able to change this layer at will, and I don't have to repeat it every single time. So instead, I'm going to use the technique called alpha matte. So now I'll be able to see the layer as long as this one is on top of it. All right, so the text is still here, but it's just hidden. So this one is using it. That's pretty cool. Now let's position our colors way better. So I think we'll just put this one here. The white one should be in the center because that's where the center that the attraction is going to be. I want people to focus the center somewhere here. I'll take this a little bit because I want to be able to see that dark, beautiful dark blue, and get this somewhere here, somewhere really near. Cool. So I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, great. Now let's look at it outside. So this should have applied it. So no, it's pretty good. Cool. Now, the next thing that I need to do is try to make that sea kind of animation. It's like it's a little bit shimmery. I'm going to duplicate the text because I need to use that again. And I'm going to make another one. I'm going to call this fractal blur, and I'll just put it here. And I just want to solo this. I just want to focus on that one. Cool. So now we only see that layer when the text appears. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use an effect called fractal noise again. Cool. So I'm just going to go again. I'm just going to go speed through because I already explained this. I'm just going to try to eyeball the look of how this is going to shimmer inside. So just a little bit like this, few bits like that. We're going to go to scaling, but I really need to scale this just a little bit, something like so. So it just affects a bit of the text. And complexity, I want more complexity, if that's possible. Thank you very much. And now the only thing that I need to do is just animate the evolution. So I'm just going to go here, put a keyframe, go all the way back here and or here, because this is where the composition ends. And I'm just going to go a little bit, something like that. Yeah. And so this is what I have. Perfect. All I need to do now is overlay this. Hold on. All I need to do, because I want to be able to see the colors before. As you can see here, that's how it looks like, but then it's a little bit too rough. So I'm just going to go and decrease this to something like 30. All right, perfect. Yeah, you see, so that just plays there. But the thing is, as you can see here, it's a little bit too rough when you look at it. So what are we going to do? We're going to go to effect, select the layer. We're going to use fast blur just to blur it a little bit so that we don't have that roughness here. You see, just a little bit. So we're just going to play. So I think 7 was pretty good guess. Yeah. So now we just have this little bit of animation that's happening to the text. So if we go back, this should be applied into the text. And as the text is going, that animation is going to be playing. Great. Now, before we get into the next part, which is a little bit technical, we're going to go and explain stuff. So effects, explanation 2. All right. We're going to put our friends here. Bum, transform, fit to comp. Cool. Let's get this full. All right. So the first effect, of course, we're going to use an adjustment layer. So of course, the first effect I'm going to talk about is directional blur. Cool. So what is directional blur? It's basically a blur, as you can see here. Basically a blur, but it depends on the direction that you want this to be. So if I increase this, you can see that everything is looking this side. If I go this way, everything is looking up there. Cool. So that's directional blur. Very straightforward. Now, the next one that I'm going to talk about is called magnify. So this is like a loop thing. So when you create it, you will have this loop. Okay, so how did I know that that was there? Because that's where the center is. So when I create, I'll have a loop. But what if I want this loop to be to cover more places? I'll just have to play with the size. So whatever the size is, so I can just animate this and you can see that the size is here. Cool. If I want to change, like this is too zoomed, I can just turn this a little bit down. And then you'll have this really freaky nice effect on top of the video. And then of course, you can feather this and just make this bigger. So you see the feather there. So this is magnify. Now, the next effect that we're going to talk about, and it's my extreme favorite effect, it's called turbulent displace. And this is how you can displace your effect. It's like a wave and you can control how big it is and how much it really affects this. And obviously you can animate this using the evolution. Of course, you can animate how complex this is. You can have as much complexity as you want. As you can see here, you can change this to many different forms of twist and turbulence. All right. That's about explaining the effects that we're going to use next. Back to our main comp. What I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new adjustment layer and I'm going to call this blur focus. Cool. So what I want to do is I want to create the focus only in the center where the text is. That's it. Everything else, I want it to be blurred completely. Cool. But I want it to be blurred in a stylized way. So I'm just going to go somewhere here and put title action save because I just want to see where the center is. So this just personally helped me. So I'm just going to go somewhere here. I'm just going to go to the end. I'm going to change the mask a little bit to be something like this. Cool. And then I'll just make this mask again so I could just duplicate it, double click and drag it to the next part. Great. Now, the thing that I want to do is I want to be able to apply the effects on top of this that will just blur everything. So again, I could go first with a directional blur. Cool. So just going to go and increase this a little bit, something like that. Yeah, it's happening. Cool. So I'm just going to increase it, but then I want it to look this way. Yeah. So as you can see here. Cool. So I just want it to look a little bit that way. Now I'm going to use another effect, and this time we're going to call it magnify. Cool. And instead of having it here, I just want to magnify anything that comes from this side of the screen, because remember, this is where the glitch and liquid is happening as we created in the first stack. Now, the problem with this again is the size of this. So it's not really covering. So I'm just going to go and really increase the size of this until it kind of covers. See, so I'm just going to keep on increasing. I think we're going to get into the 900s. Yeah, something like that. So now it covered pretty much all of this. Great. So now, see that? See that thing? That's what I'm talking about. Cool. So this is the magnify effect. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is a little bit of turbulence. Why? Because I think this is not liquidy enough. So let's just make this slightly liquid. We're going to do a little bit of turbulent displace because we just want to make everything that is not in the center, not in the focus, wavy. And the thing that I'm going to do here, I'm going to change this to bulge because I prefer bulgy displace than the normal one. But that's just a personal preferences after I've been playing with this tutorial for a bit, and we'll just make sure something like this. Yeah, that's pretty good. Cool. And then it's gonna close this, and we need another turbulent displace. This time we're going to use the turbulent smoother. All right. So all this, how do I know turbulent smoother and bulge? It's because I have been testing with this effect for quite a while when I was doing this tutorial, and I found that these are the best. The reason I did the turbulent smoother because it gives me this stretched liquid feeling here. Look at that. You see? So it's like it just stretches a little bit. So it gives me this really beautiful detail. You see this, how it's stretched? So that's what I want. That's why I chose turbulent smoother. Any other effect is not really gonna give it to me. So we're just gonna go with a little amount again. All right, so let's just go a little bit half so that we can go fast since I'm recording. So we're just gonna go a little bit like that. Yeah. And we're just gonna increase the size a little bit. Something like that, you see? Yeah, that's really cool. So that's about this. Could actually increase a little bit of the details. Nice. Let's just see if we can get a really beautiful face. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. All right, so it's affecting here and it's affecting here. I just feel like this is a little bit too sharp. So we're just gonna go to feather, select this boat, hopefully. Yeah, nice. So I'm just gonna increase this to a point where it's a little bit big. Cool. Let's see how this looks for now. Cool. So we're still going to work on this a little bit. But yeah, so far, so good. Now it's time to make this blur more funky. So I'm going to create a new adjustment layer and I'm going to call this mega funky blur. And you'll see why I called it that way. So I'm just going to put it somewhere here. Great. Now let's focus on this one. What I'm going to do right now, I'm going to create an effect called Displacer Pro. So this is an effect that you can get on AA scripts. So Displacer Pro, I've already explained on the previous tutorials why this is really important and you need to have it in your tools. I'm going to use that blur map that we did. I'm going to make sure it's effects and text. And all I'm going to do now, I'm going to play with this. This is why I want this effect. So I'm going to play with this. Yeah, I could also play with this. So as you can see here, it displaces things in a perfect way. So normally with a normal displacement map, you won't be able to rotate. You will only be able to rotate if you have a Displacer Pro. And the rotation displacement, I feel like it adds way too much into this. Again, I'm just going to go make a keyframe at the end, somewhere here. I'm just going to make a keyframe on the blur map here, translate and rotate. Perfect. And now I'm gonna go all the way to the back, just decrease just a little bit, because I just want it to move like water and just slightly like that. Yeah, that's it. Cool. And then gray. So you can see that small displacement, but yeah, goes a long way. All right, so that is for Displacer Pro. Now we're gonna add a radial blur. The reason I'm adding a radial blur, it's because I really wanted to focus in the center, and in the beginning it's gonna be powerful. That's where we use the radial blur. Radial blur normally it's on spin, but I want the spin, I want the zoom. So this is what they use in, you know, movies to make a shot look more actionable. So right now this is very blunt, but with a radial blur you can go a really long way. So I'm just gonna increase this a little bit. Yeah, all right, so that's pretty good. It's just right here. So as you can see here, everything is just looking right at the center and everything is being stretched. You see, everything is just looking right there. Cool. And of course, at the end of the render, make sure you add this to high. Cool. But since I'm recording and I'm streaming at the same time, it's really hard for me to go high right now because it's just gonna crush everything. All right, save. Great. Now close this. We're gonna create my most favorite effect in After Effects, and that is called VR chromatic aberration. Let's go. All right, so what's gonna happen here? I'm gonna get an extremely funky VR, a chromatic aberration. We created a chromatic aberration, but the reason I want this is because it's funky. So the way it is being generated, it's like for VR, but I'm not using it for VR. I just like the way it creates things in a funky way. And so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna keep this as it is, and I'm gonna try to go a little bit. So as you can see, so let's just focus on this. Yeah, so normally it's like this, and I'm just trying to just play with this until I kind of, you know, sort it out in the center. Yeah, somewhere like that. Cool. And I could just invert it, so as you can see here, and then I just invert it to make sure that it's just in the center there. Cool. All right, now you'll be able to see the difference. Now that's why I call it the funky blur, because now I get to stretch this. Now the only thing I have to do is to play with how far is the red, how far is the green, how far is the blue. That's why I really I'm so excited about this effect whenever I use it. I'm just gonna go something like -30, and I'm just gonna try to play with the green, and that's gonna give things way better. You see that? And then I'm gonna go to 19 for the blue. Cool. Now we'll have everything stretched like that. That's pretty cool. So now things are gonna be funky. You see that? Yeah. Now I'm just gonna have to do the last blur, which is the camera lens blur. The camera lens blur is an extremely resource GPU heavy blur, so just be cautious. Now, normally the reason we use camera lens blur, it's to give a better focus and look into things, and also to create maybe something like bokeh effect. But to do that, most of the time you would need a blur map. So I'm just going to create a blur map specifically for the camera lens blur. All right, so I'm just going to create a new solid. I'm going to call this blur camera. I'm going to just focus on this one. And obviously we're going to call our friend fractal noise. Now, so this is a little bit too sharp. I'm going to go to dynamic. Perfect. And I'm just going to go and increase this a little bit and decrease this a bunch. Yeah. And I'm just going to go inside and scale this a whole lot again. The same thing as we did, and I'm just gonna invert this. Cool. And the only thing I'm gonna do here again is I'm gonna fast blur this, basically just like what we did, but this time it's gonna be more blurred than before, like that. Perfect. And now what I need to do, I just need to animate how this looks like. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to animate the evolution, but in the same time I could also animate the brightness as well. Evolution and brightness. And then I'm gonna go all the way to the end, which is 2 seconds, and we're just gonna go a little bit like this. I think the complexity is too much, so we're just gonna cut it back to 4:4, just exactly what we did with the focus blur map. And yeah, I think I'm just gonna decrease a lot so that I can focus here. See that? Perfect. Now I'm gonna put this here. Right now we don't see anything because we need to tell it, hey, use the lens blur, but it doesn't know what's going on because I need to tell it to focus on the effect itself. Now if I increase this camera lens blur to something crazy like 50, you see now it's happening here. Cool, because the effect is happening there. Great. And I'm just gonna start playing with this a bit. So I'm just gonna do full resolution because I really need to focus here. I'm just gonna do something like this faster. So this is just to only focus on and render this region. I'm gonna increase the roundness a little bit too. Cool. I'm gonna make the aspect ratio really weird, 3.3. As you can see, it's really heavy to render. And yeah, there we go. So I get this really beautiful thing here. And the rotation, I want it to be straight to the camera, which is 90. Perfect. Now we got our entire thing. The next thing that we need to do, we need to take care of how this can look like LCD. So now the effect is on, but we need to work on how it actually looks like. So if we go back here, now we just need to give it like this. You see this LCD thing? It's like it's made of those LCD pixels. So that's what we're going to work on. Now that we have this, we're going to try to create the LCD trick. Now, there's this small LCD trick. Maybe sometimes you don't have the texture. Maybe you're really running out of time and you just want to create something on your own. The easiest way to create an LCD trick is basically to create a new composition. I'm going to call this LCD dotted. All right. And I'm just going to make a new solid. I'm going to see dots. And I'm just going to go back to my text animation and make sure that this goes in here. So now what's happened? It's just right on top of it. But I'm going to put it on top of the stack because I don't want it to be affected by spider stack. Cool. Now let's get back inside. And in here, I'm just gonna close it. Just gonna change the color of this because I want to be able to see my dots, because this is dark and this is dark. So I'm just gonna press Ctrl K, composition settings, and I'm just gonna make this something like this so that I'm able to see the background. Now, the first effect that we're gonna use obviously is a Venetian blinds. And Venetian blinds is this thing that just works like your window blinds. That's where the name comes from. So I'm just gonna go to 50 and I'm gonna go to 6. So I want to have more. So if you want to have more details on your LCD, you just have to increase this. All right, now I'm just gonna duplicate exactly this one, and instead of having it like this, I'm just gonna do it on the other side. So now we have this. Now, how do we get a dotted line? If you have a square and want to get a dotted line, the only thing you need to do is a little bit of blur, something like this. Cool. So if we go back, it's like this. So you can see this little things here. Cool. Now, and to make this really stand out and work like an LCD, all you have to do is overlay this. So now it should work. Cool. So now it's overlay. Perfect. All right. Now it's time to make things a little bit more beautiful. And what we're going to do a little bit of color correction. The way we do color correction always is new adjustment layer. I'm going to call this CC. All right. So the CC is going to be slightly below the blur focus. And what we're going to do now is we're going to use a bunch of effects that will help us improve and enhance the quality. Cool. The first one is deep glow. I've talked about this a lot on my tutorials. Please get it as well. It's a really important effect and it's way better than the glow that you have, and it just gives you everything without you having to do anything. So in this deep glow, as you can see already, it already uplifted everything. So I'm just gonna this off for a while, the focus blur. Cool. So I just want to focus on this. So it's already a cool start frame already, but we'll just have to make it a little bit better. So the one thing about the deep glow is I wanted to this here, the radius of the glow, I wanted to really reach more. I wanted to, you know, go into further places, bleed in. We call this bleeding. I need that bleeding. So what to do is I'm gonna really increase this. So as you can see here, look at that, it just reaches more, and I need it to really reach a lot more. So we're just gonna go like 700s. So as you see here, this radius is now leaking. As you can see here, it leaks through a lot of things, and then if we increase this, you can see how far it leaks. Now for the exposure, I don't need it to be that high, so I'm just gonna go to 0.28. So the exposure is how you control. So now it's leaking, but it's not that apparent, because the reason I didn't do that, because at this frame everything is going to be so close, so I don't want it to be that apparent. So I'm just going to show you an example. So if we go back here to 1, you see it's too strong. Now the next effect, we're going to do a quick RGB chromatic aberration again. We're going to keep it on red and blue. We're going to keep the same scale, just that for the scale we're just going to make it a little bit more apparent. So we're just going to go on 99.5. So we just get this slight thing going. Now the last one, we're going to add an effect that it's not really used a lot because it's used for color correction, and it's called Lumeter color. Now the reason I like Lumeter color because it has everything when it comes to color correction. And the reason I really need it here is because I want to use this creative tab here. The creative tab lets me use LUT maps, lookup tables. So this maps are, you know, done by color graders, and then it's saved so that other people can get the same color grading. When you install your After Effects, normally it comes with a lot of LUTs, and the one that I'm going to choose is called LUT Bleach HDR, this one. You see, so then it changes the color of everything. You see how funky it becomes. It's really beautiful. You get this stretched out feeling. It's really beautiful, and you get this difference and gradient in the blue. That's so beautiful. And I think the intensity is a little bit too high, to be honest, so we're just going to turn it down a bit to 80. Cool. So that is when it comes to that. The last thing I could do is play a little bit with the curve. So we're just going to go get this a little bit like that. I think we could just turn this down a bit, and then yeah, it gets too dark. So we're just gonna turn it a little bit like that. Yeah, and then if we can just bring this really bright points to a lesser bright, that would be great. Yeah, I think this is perfect. So before, after, you see, just a little bit of color correction, you can go a long way. And now with the blur stack, we get this really beautiful thing going on here. All right, before we move in, there's something that is really weird in my situation, which is, do you see this thing here? Right here. That's because of my magnify. If you have the same thing, that's because of the magnify effect. Now remember, in the blur focus, we had the magnify here. To fix that, all I need to do is just drag it a little bit more, and then look for something that I like. Cool, so maybe I like it to be liquidy from here. But the thing is, we fix this, but then we mess up this. And to fix that, I'm just gonna hack my way to the point where I don't see it. Cool. So now this should be fixed. All right, this is looking incredible already. Good job, good job. Now we're gonna use a little bit of the files that we have. All right, so if you download the files from the link in the description, you'll be able to see one of the maps, which is a little bit of grain, and this Okay, so if you cannot use the grain, if you cannot download the file, all you could do is, so if you don't have that grain footage, what you could do is either download another grain footage. I'm pretty sure you'll find something online, or you could use this effect called add grain. So when you add grain, it's just going to show you this. You're going to want to say final output, and you just turn down the intensity to 0.5, something. So that's how you do it. But for our case, we're going to use these two textures. So the first one, we're going to bring this grain here, and we're going to put it below the focus. Cool. So now what we could do here, it says hard light. So obviously I'm just going to go and do a hard light. If you don't have that one, that's because you have this not there. So just click it or F4 and you'll be able to see the hard light. Perfect. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to, I think it's a little bit too big. So I'm just going to go and say transform fit to comp, and it should be able to fit. So you'll have that grain there. That's great. Now the next thing that I need to do is I need to try and get this burn in there. And the way this goes, it goes below the dotted LCD. All right, let's focus on this one first. What I want to do is transform this to fit the comp. I don't want this to be there, so I'm just going to go and turn it. So I'm holding shift while rotating. All right, great. If this thing does not fit your entire timeline, all you could do is you can go to time and enable timer open, or if you don't want to do that and go faster, you go on one of the ends and you hold Alt. When you hold Alt, you'll be able to increase the time of your layer. Cool. So now it fits the entire stack. Now it would be really great to have this, but the problem is it hides everything below it. Why? Because it's a video and it's not alpha, and we have this thing right here. So how are we going to take care of that? We're going to call in for the linear color key. So we use the linear color key to get rid of some colors. So for example, let's just put the text. So we don't see the text, but then why? Because we have a black thing here. So if I go and choose that black or this black, the black is gone. Great. Now the only problem that we have is this blue thing here. Okay, so I'm just gonna duplicate and go and take that blue out. But the thing is, it's a little bit too rough. So let's smooth things out. So first I'm gonna smooth this a little bit, then make the tolerance of black a lot more, something like that. And then we need to smooth as well the blue, something like that. Cool. So now this should be there. Perfect. Let's see how it looks. Obviously, we need to change how this looks like. So we're just going to go with some color dodge. Cool. All right. So that works perfectly. Okay. Before we add the other textures, we need to fix this problem. The reason you're having this problem where the grunge still has the gray and you don't really need to remove the gray. The only problem that's happening is because here in the chromatic aberration, we have this unmold thing. So if you just turn it off, it should be fine. Cool. So everything works perfectly. Now, this is what we have. Now we need to add more textures. So for that, I have a few textures that are included in the link below. So we have this texture. So it's kind of light bleaks. So if you have some other textures, you could use them. All right. But I prefer these ones. And for the sake of going fast in this tutorial, I prepared a composition that you will also find when you download this project file. You'll find this composition called Legacy Stack. So what I did here is I removed all the effects and I just kept exactly the timing of each video. So each video, how much the texture we want, I just kept it there, and also the position of it. Great. So the first thing, I'm gonna get this one. All right, let's go quick. We're gonna go back to our text animation, and I'm gonna put this guy in, and of course it's gonna be below the FX stack because it has to feel with the FX stack. So I'm just gonna put everything up and just focus on this guy. Right now, the problem again is that we have a little bit of blackness here, and the blackness is not alpha, so we'll have to remove it on our own. I'll make sure that this is add. Now, the one thing that I'm gonna do, the reason we do add is just because we wanna like the colors when they meet together with this one, we want the colors to be bright. So that's why we put an add instead of normal. You see, we just put add because we want these to actually interact with whatever is below. Cool. So I'm just going to go to the legacy here and legacy 29, and we're going to go for linear color key. We'll just remove this color and we don't need too much of it, just a little bit. Cool. Let's just look at it as it is. Cool. So we removed a bit of it. So we just clean a bunch of it. We're just going to try to color it a little bit. So we're going to use this color. Cool. It's a little bit different from the one that we have because I want to get rid of this RGB and green thing here because I feel like it's really distracting from what I want to achieve. And we're going to blur this because this is too sharp. We just want to blur this a lot more, something like that. And the last thing is we want to have this stylized to our need. So what are we going to do? We're going to make a directional blur, and this time the blur is going to look down here, and we're just going to increase this blur a lot. Cool. So now you see what happened here? So it just blur things horizontally. So so it's much better. Cool. So if we just turn this up, we'll get this cool blending of colors, you see, with all that together. And then this stays like that. It's really cool. Let's go for the next one. So I'm just gonna go and bring this guy. Gonna come back here, gonna paste it, yeah, also rotate it. Cool. So I'm just gonna put this one. This guy is on add as well, but the reason we don't see it because I closed the layer here. So this is what we're interested on now. It's this guy right here. It's really beautiful. Now what I'm gonna do a little bit of opacity here. So I'm just gonna say something like that. Yeah, so I don't want it to appear abruptly, so I'm just gonna go to 0 and then it appears. So I don't want it to appear abruptly. I want it to smoothly appear. Again, we need to fix this. So the first thing we need to fix here is the linear color key again. So we'll just go bring in the black, take it off just a little bit again, and we're just gonna bring literally everything that we did here, and yeah, that's all. Cool. And we just bring them here, but instead of having this blur too much because it completely kills it, just gonna go to 22. Yeah, cool, that's better. Now let's just play with how it looks. All right, so I'm just gonna go to the curves because it's really hard to see it now. So I'm just gonna go to the curve, bring up the brightness a little bit. All right, and I'm just gonna take the red and just increase it a bit. Yeah, because we want to get that purple thing when it mixes. Great, so this is good for now. And the last one, which is Legacy 11, just gonna take it. This is the big boy. We're gonna put it down here. Yeah, that's the big boy. See that big boy? Yeah, this guy. All right, so what are we gonna do to this guy? We're gonna play with it, but it's gonna be quite interesting. So the first thing we're gonna do, linear color key. So I'm just gonna look for a place where I can see the black. All right, and then I'm just gonna go and bring this black from here or bring it from here. Okay, black is gone. I'm just gonna increase a bit the tolerance because I want it to disappear a bit, not too much, but just something like that. See, that's why I increased a bit the matching softness, because sometimes they'll be so bright and I don't want that. It's beautiful, nice. We'll kill this a bit. So one, it's too sharp. We'll have to blur this a little bit. Cool. So this is way better. Yeah, but we need to take care of how bright that thing is. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna go to opacity 100, and let's just say we want it to end at 50. Go like 1, 2. But here, because that's the point when it becomes super bright, we'll just say 25. You see, so it's not that bright. Actually, we could just take everything and just easy ease. All right, now let's look at a place where we can see them clearly, which is here. And I'm just gonna do a directional blur just like we did for that one, because we just wanna stretch it exactly. We're gonna use the same value, something like that. Yeah, we just stretch things up to remove more of the details. Now, the funky part, which is for color gradient. So this is where we're gonna stylize our texture. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use some of the colors that I've already set up. So you could just follow me, just copy these colors. Now, I'm gonna go at the end, and what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take this off. Cool. And this is about how you feel about it. So I'm just gonna go take this here, take this a little bit here. Actually, I could just take this one here and put this one here. Yeah, that's even better. Yeah, that's even way better. Yeah, just get this one here and get the blue, get it somewhere here. Yeah, and this one, get the yellow here. Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's right there. That's the blue. The red is there, which is nice. All right, now I'm just gonna go and put a keyframe on each point, and then at the very beginning, I'm just gonna go and put them just like how they were, kind of. So I'm just gonna put this one here, I'm 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 gonna put this one here. So it's just like a little bit of color play. Cool. If we look at it like that, so what's gonna happen is, see, so they will merge with the layer and they'll be colored exactly like we wish to be on the final composition. So that's how we take care of texture stacks. Now, the last thing we're gonna do, we're gonna take everything and we're gonna pre-compose it so that we are ready to render. All right, it's looking nice. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna take this, just a little detail. We're gonna take this, we're gonna duplicate it, and we're gonna call this text leak blur. What we're going to do, just like what we named it, we're going to create a little bit of text leak. So what we're going to do here, we're going to use a directional blur to do this. And we're going to go like something really big, like 3.5. You see what I'm going to? And what I'm going to do before actually we animate this, because we'll want to animate this to keep on like animating like that. But we're not going to do it by hand. And what I'm going to add here is a fast box blur, because you see, it's very straight, it's very detailed, and we don't like this. So we're just going to go something like that. Cool. And right now I'm going to go here. I'm going to alt click on this to make an expression. And the expression I'm going to use, you can just type it if you don't understand it. You can just do 350. 50. And basically what this is saying is, as you can see here, so basically what this is saying is every second, change the value of this 3 times. How much you're going to change it by? 350, between minus 350 and 350. So After Effects is going to keep on juggling. You see this? You're going to keep on adding the value randomly to that 345 that we started with. So it's just going to keep on playing randomly. So that's how you create randomness in After Effects, is by putting an expression of wiggle. That's all. And what I'm going to do here basically is just animate this opacity. So in the beginning, it's going to be, you see this leak? That's what I'm talking about. That's the beauty. So 100, and it ends on 100, but then somewhere here, you can just do a 50, something here. And then we just beautify this. See how beautiful that leak is? Great. Now, that's when it comes to directional blurs. Now, let's comp everything. So I'm going to create a new composition. I'm going to call it final CC. So this is the one that we're going to render. So I'm just going to take the text animation and bring it here. See, render. And I'm going to put that one there. So this is the one that, has everything. Well, the first thing I need to do is I need to do a little bit of a background first. So I'm going to create a new background. Call this BG. I'm going to put this in. Perfect. And I like to create that Hollywood stripe thing. And the way I do it is I create a new solid. I call it the Hollywood stripe. And it's not going to be blue. It just has to be black. And I'm going to double click to create a mask. And all I'm going to do is double click, hold control to be able to control both of them together. And I'm just going to go to something like this. Subtract. Cool. All right. So that's how you create that stripe. I just like it. So we hide everything that we have created. Cool. Now this is looking so beautiful already. And what I'm going to do next, I'm going to create a little bit of a time. I'm going to create a new adjustment layer, call this time remap. And what I'm going to use here, I'm going to use a posterized time effect. So this will reduce the number of frames in the composition, so it will be more stylized. All right, so it's going to be, as you can see, it's going to be more stylized. So without it, you see, it's very smooth. If that's what you like, that's good. But for my case, I like to be stylized. So I'm just going to lock it so that I don't select it. I'm going to lock this one as well. And what I'm going to create now, I'm going to create a vignette right now. For the vignette, I'm going to create a new solid. I'm going to call this vignette. And what we can do, we can create just a mask quickly, something like this. Just quickly where we want the user to focus. So we just want the user to focus here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this one here. I'm going to go to mask, going to go to subtract, and we're just going to try to feather this a lot like that. And yeah, we go to opacity and bring it to like 30%. Cool. So it just makes things more focused in here. So what we could do, we can just lock this one. What we're going to do next is a shout out to Yati the Man. So you can go on Twitter, Yati the Man. He shared with us a while ago this trick. So I'm going to use it to have this really beautiful stylized blur. So it's his signature. So I'm gonna call this Yata Man. It's very simple basically. So what you do, you create a curve and you completely obliterate everything in terms of brightness. You only keep the bright part, okay? And then you add a tint. The tint obviously is gonna be red. You just go all the way red, or you could go to whatever color you feel like. But for my case, I like the red. Bring up the red, and we're just gonna blur this. Just gonna blur this to something like that. And then all I have to do is screen this. Cool. So it just makes things sometimes way better. If you fancy it, keep it. If you don't fancy it, don't keep it. But it's up to you. One thing that I want to do now, I want to create a new adjustment layer, and I'm going to call this sharpen. Just going to put it under. So for the sharpen, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create an effect called sharpen. And the reason I'm going to do the sharpen, so let's just look at it like this. So the reason we're going to use sharpen is just to add more details up. So to bring the details up, so we're just gonna add 16. So it just adds a little bit of crispiness into the whole thing. Cool. Yeah, we just give it a halt. So this is sharpen. Now the next thing I'm gonna do is a little bit funky, and that is to add an optical flare. I wonder how this is gonna look like this way. I think I need to fix this. Yeah, I need to fix this one. So we'll do it later. So I'm gonna create a new solid. I'm gonna call this optical bokeh. And the way we're gonna work with this, it's really simple. So we're just gonna create a video copilot optical flare. So I think if you use After Effects, you really need this one by now. Just gonna break it like that. We're gonna clear everything. We don't need anything here. The only thing that we need out of all this is here, which is the lens texture. We're gonna go to random, cool, and we're just gonna press OK. So we're gonna get this. So what we want to do is we just wanna animate this. But the problem with this is that it's too sharp. Okay, so first we're gonna add, and then stop on transparent. Cool. So we'll get this. I think if you fancy this, please go ahead. But I personally like the bokeh look of things. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm just gonna decrease this because I think it's too bright. We need a little bit of flicker because now the only thing that is animated is this. So now this is just not doing anything, and I think that's not really great. So I'm just gonna go with a sharp one because I want it to, keep blinking. So I want it to blink 5 times a second and randomly 60. So you can see, so it's just blinking. So that's what I'm looking for. Now go back to third. What I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna add camera lens blur. Perfect. I think I could just go to screen, no need to add. So I could go to our camera lens blur and we keep it hexagon. You see this thing? That's what the aspect ratio does, but I think they're on the wrong way. So I'm just gonna make them align with the camera. So now they are straight. So basically that's the camera lens blur trick to get the bokeh. But the thing about this is that it's too low. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna alt click. So I want it to keep wiggling on the value. I'm gonna do a wiggle and I'm just gonna do 3 times a second with a value of 5. Okay, could increase this actually to something like that. Cool. Now the only thing that I need to do is just animate this a bit. So I'm gonna say in the beginning, this is here. After a while, this is here. After a while, it's here. And then after a while, it's here. And then I'll just take everything here, F9, go to the curve and make this way faster. So what we're gonna have, cool. But then it's gonna be in bokeh style, which is perfect with what we have. Great. Now, so one of the last thing that we need to do is just add that grungy texture. So I have this grungy texture here. So I'm just gonna take it and yeah. So I'm just gonna take it and try to put it somewhere here first. And all I need to do is just color dodge this. So I'm gonna have grungy texture there, which adds a lot of beauty to the entire composition. Great. Yeah, basically that's how it is. If you want to add more details, that's basically the tutorial ends here. But if you want to add more details, one thing that I did was I put this on screen, and what you could do here to make this even better, you could just go, for example, let's just say ball action. All right. And the reason I want to show you this trick, it's a trick that we use to create that LCD kind of look the old way. So the old way was you put it like 2, and then you make a little bit of what do we call things here, and just to make things different from each other, you just increase this. Okay, so it's like the instability increases. Cool. So then you will have this, which is pretty cool. See, it's pretty cool. And this is a 3rd resolution. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. On the link below, you will find how to create included as a bonus, how to create this final extremely high detail LCD TV look, if you're interested. But for now, this is the main focus of the video, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. And of course, if you have any question, leave them on the comments and I'll be extremely happy to answer any question that you have. My name is Mr. Popo and we are Popo. I'll catch you on the next one.